Welcome. I'm Pen, and this is part 2 in this little series covering idles and run. It will be the final one on YouTube. If you want to see the attack and death animations, check out my Patreon, check out my itch page. Thank you. Let's get into it. So for the run animation, we're gonna follow the same kind of process as the idle. It's a little trickier, but the process is somewhat the same. We're going to be doing the constant motion, so same approach, where it's just a constant motion throughout the animation and it just loops seamlessly. And we'll follow the same kind of breakdown of the animation. We'll get the keyframes, which pretty much all the frames since it's constant, and we'll focus on the flow. So much like the idle, the run, and we'll just copy and paste that frame. And we'll name it run. The run will have a mid, a high, and a low. The only difference is the low is very low. And my kind of setup is to make 4 frames. So we have 4 frames, and we'll focus on the head again. And we will move the head very low. So the first frame is the extremely low frame. And then the second frame will be the mid, so we'll move it 1 down, and then the third frame is the high, and then the fourth frame is the mid as well. So now you can see in the preview over here is we have this head that's just bouncing, and you can't really tell much from this, but as we go on, you will slowly see the run animation develop. And much like the idle, you can see we just focus on the head. Head is slowly bouncing. The run is much more aggressive. So now let's continue. And instead of the idle, where we duplicated each frame side by side, we are gonna just copy and paste the entire frame. So I'm gonna highlight all these frames, hold Control, and drag them over. And now we have a looping of the 4 animation. And the main difference here is on the last 4, so frame 5, 6, 7, and 8, we're actually going to be turning his head and his body eventually. But right now, just focusing on the head, we're going to turn it just ever so slightly. So, and we only have to do that once, and we'll just copy and paste this frame and move it to the other ones. So what we want to do is this right side, we want to take away some pixels, and this left side we want to move the eye over and move the lighter color here, shift everything over. So we can go ahead and move that. I'm just going to grab as much as I can. I'm going to move it 1 over. I'm going to move the nose over, and I'm going to get rid of this eye and delete some here. And I'm also going to delete these ones and delete this and this. And we can go ahead and fill in this, and we can shift everything over. I believe the eye was more like that, but we did have a space there. So we'll keep that consistent. And we just want to make sure everything's as consistent as it can be. And this line will shift ever so slightly as well, and we'll fill in that. So now we have a rough base, and hopefully it's okay. We can shift these over as well, I believe. And that should be the last. So now if you just manually go through, you can see, and it's probably easier to do the first frame and the 5th frame since they're the same height. You can see what should we shift. And right away I see that shading, or the highlight, it's all just stretched out, which is okay. I think that looks fine. So now we can go ahead and copy this, and we can paste it over this, but we're gonna have some overlap here. So we just gotta remember where the heads are, and easiest way to do that is to just wing it. And I'm just gonna shift these over, link them so they're all pasted. Then the middle one I know is the high frame, and we can check the height by just comparing the frames. So we know the 7th frame is going to be equal to the 3rd frame, and that looks good. And the last frame is going to be equal to the 4th frame, and that looks good. So eyeballing it was a success. And now you can see the head shifting, and it's starting to look like somewhat of a run animation. So we'll go ahead and save that, and we'll continue on. And next step is the body. We can tackle the body and get that flowing nicely. And I probably would have, if you're early on, I probably would have just got the flow of the head without turning it first, and then focused on the flow of the body and the legs. But since this is pre-planned, thought it might be easier just to flip the head as well. So let's just go ahead and get the movement of all the flow of all the parts before we start making them turn in the last 4 frames. So let's get the movement of everything, and then we'll focus on the leg, and then we can start turning everything. So let's do the body, and the last frame is going to be down more, so we'll bring it all the way down here. And this cloak here, let's just keep it consistent and move them around. So maybe this one goes underneath, that one goes, one can go over here, and we can see it goes up. And then the 3rd frame is the highest frame, and we can move it up, and then perhaps it stays up as the head goes down. And we can quickly copy and paste these 4 frames, and we can just hold shift, delete these, hold control, and drag them over. And now we can see the body is moving, and the flow looks good. And it was just bringing the body down, lining up the head, and then bringing up, and then instead of coming back down on the highest frame, it just stays. And we can also test it still going up. So let's see how that looks on these 2 frames. And that looks okay as well. And these aren't final. We can always go back and adjust them. But now let's get the bag and the sword, which you can pick either one. We'll start with the sword. So the sword is going to be at its lowest point there, then it comes up. And let's get the original sword. I feel like that's not, I think this one is the original. Yes. I do think it's bent because we took it from the 1st frame and we bent it originally. So let's take that one. So all these are actually going to be bent. I'm just going to delete them and extend cell. If you right click and hit extend cell, it's going to extend it to the end until it hits another cell. That's an extension, and if you just look it up on itch.io, you'll probably find it pretty quickly. And then I unlink it, and then we can start moving. Then so the 1st frame, it's going to be on the ground. 2nd frame, it's going to be moving up, so we'll move it up 1. Then the 3rd frame, we'll move it up perhaps two frames, and then the last one will be maybe, and we can just copy and paste these, or delete and control. Oops, make sure you have all of them highlighted, and move them over. And this looks a little too aggressive, so let's go in and make some adjustments. Moves up, and then maybe that's too high. So the last frame, so let's move both of those down. And that looks good. I think you'll start to see it more when we adjust it, and a quick way to adjust the sword to see how it will look, we can turn it a bit, or we can take the easy route and highlight the 4 last frames and just hold V, and you can see it will highlight the sword, and that kind of tells you that you're on the right layer. And then you can click and pull them over 2 frames. And now you can see the sword is moving back and forth, and it looks more like a run animation. And we can always add more to that, but this is an easy way that looks good and it fits the animation style. So now we can do the body. Sorry, not the body, the bag. And the bag is going to be low on the low frame. It's going to be perhaps even lower on the up frame or the mid frame, and then it bounces up, and then we can have it bounce way up. And let's see how that looks. And that took us not so much time at all, and it looks okay. Let's turn off the legs and just get a visual without the legs there of everything. It's looking like a run animation, which is what we're aiming for. So now with the bag, let's do the same thing as the sword and highlight the last 4 frames, and or perhaps let's mess around with the height So this frame here, let's say it goes down, this one goes, so this one, sorry, the first frame, we'll keep it the same, goes down, and then it comes up. We'll make it go up twice, and then let's make it come up quite a bit and see how that looks, and then we'll copy and paste those and paste it. And I think that looks a little better, so a little more exaggeration. And then we're going to do the same thing as we did with the sword, highlight the last 4, hold V, we can see the box around the bag, and let's just move it to the left. Since his body's shifting to the left over here, the sword's going to go to the right and the bag will go to the left. And that didn't make much of a difference, so let's do 2 pixels. And now you can see the bag a lot more. It's going side to side and it's just giving off more bag vibes, which is good. So now we basically have the flow of everything and it's looking pretty good, and we just need to add the leg movements. So let's go ahead and turn on one leg. I'm going to start with the his left leg, but it's on our right side. And basically I'm not going to move pixels, I'm just going to move the entire leg itself and just get the flow. So this bottom one, it's if you're following a walk and run animation workflow guide, this would be the frame where the legs are crossing. So if we just move that in underneath, you're not going to see anything, and then it's going to start coming up, come up here, and we can always turn on onion skin, and it's going to extend more, and then this last frame, it's going to come back down. And we could just copy and paste those and see how that looks. And it's starting to look like something. A pretty cartoonish run, but decent nonetheless. So now we have the flow of that leg going, and now it's just making adjustments. So a big thing with these legs is they're the same color. And a good way to make it a little easier on the eye is to do a darker one, which we have, which is this color, and then a lighter one, which is the same as this one. So we can go ahead and take all of this leg here and go Shift R, and it's going to change from this color here, and we're going to do a lighter one. So maybe the third, if you have the Apollo palette, the third dark one here, and then we can tackle that leg in a sec. But back to leg 1, we can just start cleaning up this and making sure it looks good. So that leg, it's gonna be both, the first frame, both legs are gonna be on the ground touching and close together. Second frame, left leg is gonna be up above the ground and the other leg will be pushing off the ground. So if we move it back here, and we'll just put it right in front of the bag to hide that bag there. And then the third frame, it's gonna be both legs off the ground. And we'll move that in. We'll make tiny adjustments here and there. And then the fourth frame, this leg's gonna be coming in. Both legs are gonna be coming in. So we can just make some adjustments now. And this is where you can erase and start to manipulate some pixels and make sure they look good. Make sure you're on the right frame and then back down. And now the big thing with these is we're gonna wanna swap the colors or just move them all together. So the thing we can do is we could just highlight these and then change the color, or we can just manually move the legs all together. But I think the easier way is just swap the color and then remember that you did that on these frames. So now we are on the third color, and this leg is gonna be the third one, and hopefully it's noticeable in the end. And then we'll jump to this leg, and we don't see it there, so we don't need to do it, but just because we'll switch it. And you see these legs go all the way up underneath, and it doesn't look like it looks silly there, but that's okay. Let's see where we're at now. Oops. So we can see the second frame, legs are coming out, but maybe the third frame, we can see these two need some adjustment. So maybe we'll just move this one like this. And these two frames look the same, so let's just maybe take those and adjust its legs, and then it's coming down. And maybe we'll adjust that. And let's check these legs. and this comes in, that looks good. And then they're together underneath all that. And then this leg's actually gonna be closer since it's the other leg, and it just gives it a little, it separates the look a little bit more. In this frame, these two, you can see the back legs are the same, so let's just move this. And then this one goes up so much since we haven't adjusted it, so move that back a little more. And this one here, we can keep it like that. Maybe delete some off there. And let's just check this back leg. Back leg's kind of still on the ground, so let's just move it up and keep it like that. And the benefit here with this character and the design is it hides a lot of the imperfections, which is something I say here. You can use VFX to cover up imperfections. You can also use capes and bags and weapons and stuff and hide the leg animations. So now we can tell it's a run animation. Underneath it might not look perfect, but no one's gonna ever see that. And you can see here the colors look good and they're swapping. So now that's left is to give some love to the body and the cape movement, and we'll be close to wrapping up the run animation. So let's jump to the cape and we'll turn off the sword just so we can see things better. In this frame here, I don't know if I like those after watching it for a while, so I'm gonna move them in. Then these are gonna want to be going this way. So we'll move them, we'll shift them over quite a bit and just see where they are and say when it comes down, these are shifting towards the middle and it hits the ground and it kind of repeats. So we could copy and paste them again, and we can even give it more oomph. So when it's going up, so the second frame, these are going to be pretty straight, and then I think when it comes up, this is going to start poofing out a bit over here. So we can do that, and then the last frame, since he's going down, it's catching some air. So we'll just do that, and then we want to remove quite a bit under here. And again, we're not going to see quite a bit. So we can always just rough it and then see how it looks, and we'll play it. And it's happening so quick. So down, maybe we'll add some there, goes up, and then not a fan of that, comes up and then comes down again. So maybe we can make the first frames settle. The cape is settling a bit more, so we can add touch here, touch there, and maybe come in like this. And I think that will look better, so let's copy and paste that on the last four. And it might be poofing out too much, so let's settle that down. Things up, poof, and settling down. And again, we'll copy and paste it, hopefully one last time. And let's just see how it looks with the sword. And it looks pretty good. Let's see what else we can add. It goes up, comes in, so maybe these are a little less. Comes in, and it comes down. And we'll maybe make it a little different on these frames instead of just copy and pasting. And then it comes down here. And I think that looks pretty good. One last thing we can try is we can keep the body the same, but one thing we can do is just move in the shoulders on the last four frames. And since we've done a lot of editing to the capes and stuff, we'll have to manually do it. That's why separating the shoulders would have been smart, but we chose not to. So let's just manually move in these frames and delete that one. And we'll do the same. Delete this one, do the same. And then this one, the last one, we'll move it. And you can see that on the far shoulder, it's looking pretty good. So let's do the same to this shoulder here. And I'll just highlight all of it, shift it over, and cape there. And then I'll actually use W, which is the magic wand tool, and then hold shift and just click on all the colors and shift it over. Do the same magic wand tool, which is W, and hold shift to select them all and move it over. And one last frame, magic wand tool, shift, click, and move it over, and then fill in this last spot here. And now you can see some movement in the shoulders, which is looking pretty good. And overall, it looks pretty good. If we go from the idle to the run, it's looking pretty good. Go ahead and save that. And there's still minor things we could do to this. If you had a kind of different shape on the back, you could make that shift as well, like the head where we shifted it a little bit, which would add a little bit more to the animation. The sword, we could do the same as well, where in the last 4 we could shift everything over. So let's try to remember what we did. Then we shift that, shift this. So we're just shifting couples twice, and we're gonna see how that looks. It might not look great, but yeah, it's taken away the little marks there, which isn't the best. We could do that again, but just make the blade shorter. So move that in. Let's just see how that looks, doing it a couple times. Not much difference. We could add the bounce to the sword, like in the idle. So let's go ahead and try that. Comes up and say this is moving down, and then this is, and then it hits the peak where it starts coming down again. So we'll move that. Then it comes all the way down, and it comes up, and we'll try to keep it a little different. And that looks more like the idle. So now we're in the idle stance, looking at the preview. Go to the run, and it looks pretty good. One last visual we can do is the effects, and this is something more, it's a little bit, it's not recommended, because in game, if you're using this for a game, you probably just want to do the particles in there. But since this is just for showcasing right now, we can do some particles. We can do, say, he lifts off here, and then it comes back down, and he lifts off again, and make sure you're on the run. And it's just a little bit of particles. We can do the same over here. And it's just little run particles, which just give it a little cuteness. Maybe these, maybe some particles jump up over here. So, and then just to see how the animation looks all together, we can go ahead and save it. We can copy all of these layers, paste it, and then go from the bag to the VFX and flatten. Then I'm going to hit Shift V, which flips all of this layer because it's all the flattened ones. I'm going to hold V, and you can see the box, it selects everything. I'll drag it down, place it in position, and then double click the layer, change the opacity down, and then you can see we have this cute little reflection. And it took us about 5 seconds, 5-10 seconds to do. And if you're with me this far, thank you so much. I'm excited to tackle the attack animation next.